All right. Hi, I'm Andy Morrison. I'm with Precision Fermentation, and I'm here to talk about a new release of our BrewMonitor system that I'm very excited to introduce. A little background on our company. Precision Fermentation's been around for going on 4 years now, and about a year and a half ago, we launched the BrewMonitor System, which is a real-time fermentation monitoring system that gives breweries automated sampling and insights into fermentation as it's happening. With this new release, I'm going to be walking through in this in this hour, in this session, I'm going to be walking through our new release functions, but I'm also going to be diving in and kind of showing you some of the standard functions that we built in right out the gate. So let's jump into it. So the basics of the BrewMonitor system and what you'll learn about it today. I'm going to be talking through the essential components, what it provides and how it provides that data that it does. I'm going to talk a little bit about visualization of data and why that's a powerful method for helping businesses. I'm going to talk through the new tools that we're excited to announce today. And I'm going to share any sort of additional business benefits that come from doing this kind of real-time monitoring and deep analytics of fermentation data. So let's start off with a quick little baseline here. So in most breweries, one of the main challenges that you find is in order to get useful data on fermentation, it takes teams of people, right? Large scale breweries have QC teams with multiple people that are manually taking samples, and so you'll have whether it's how someone uses a specific piece of equipment or the specific time frame that they give themselves to do a task or whatever it is, right? You have variability between personnel that are collecting data and the way that data is collected. One of the other constraints that you'll find is that instrumentation can get pretty expensive, right? You can imagine like GC mass spectrometers and things like that, the price tag on all of the equipment that you need to check all the things that you want to in a brewery become pretty expensive. That price tag builds up pretty quickly. So and then just the time it takes, right? So there's a labor cost to doing it, and so you see a lot of breweries that that take just a once every 24 hours. They do their daily samples, and some breweries that do even less than that, right? Based on labor constraints and just the inability to get in on the weekends or whatever it is, right? You'll see folks that will not be taking frequent samples. And so what we saw was an opportunity to kind of step into that realm and help bring our solution, the BrewMonitor system, which gives high frequency data in real time, which gives brewers the much more robust ability to detect issues in real time, to run deeper analytics, because the focus becomes less on the manual labor of drawing samples and reading those samples and recording the data from it, and then taking that data and building it into a database and visualizing it. All those sorts of steps that add to the issues with visualizing and truly interpreting data in a really powerful way. We have the ability to do that in an automated way, or we create the ability to do that in an automated way. So it's quicker insights, it's more real-time, proactive ability to adjust on the fly, if there are issues that arise. So we created this baseline system. This is the thing that we released. I'll kind of walk through what we did a year and a half ago with our initial BrewMonitor 1.0 release. So what you're looking at here is sort of a shoebox-sized, what we call sensor hub. It connects to a sample port of a tank. It needs power and Wi-Fi, as well as a standard port to be able to plug into. It has a couple of pumps inside. It draws fluid across some sensors and deposits it back into a tank in a closed system. And it takes all the data that it's reading every 10 minutes and transmits it over Wi-Fi into the cloud so that you have access to it wherever you are. It's a removable box. It's modular, so you can pull it off of one tank, run it through its CIP, and move it on to another tank when you're starting up a new fermentation. And it's designed to stay on the tank for the life of an entire fermentation. So it just sits there and continues to grab samples throughout that process to give you that data. Then the other side of it is that console that I mentioned, the web-based console. So the box is pushing that data up into the cloud. You have access to it from any web browser. It's mobile friendly, so you can look at your data from a laptop, desktop computer, tablet, phone, anything that has a web browser gives you access to that data in real time. So you're looking at it as it's happening. And then we've also built that console not only to just show you the data, but to provide those deeper analytics, as well as pushing out alert notifications to give you emails or text messages based on parameters that you'll be able to set in the system. So again, this is a modular system. It's designed to be on any and all types of cellar arrangements. So whether you just have one tank that you want to monitor, whether you have multiple tanks that you want to move a sensor hub between fermentations to monitor one fermentation at a time, but in multiple tanks, or if you're a brewery that has multiple brew pub locations, satellite tap rooms with small pilot systems, whatever it is, where you've got multiple locations and multiple fermentations, all of that data streams out of our system into the same console in the cloud that you have access to. So to talk a little bit more about visualization in a minute here, I'm going to take you into a demo of the actual system itself so that you can see what the data looks like, what a live fermentation looks like, and what some of our deeper fermentation analytics look like. What I want to point out about visualization, it's very important for us with high frequency data. We're collecting every 10 minutes. If we just deposited that data into a table and handed it off to brewers that way, it would be excessively cumbersome. It could be hard to interpret or look through, right? There's just a lot. It's overwhelming to look at that much data, to be honest. So it was very important for us to take and visualize that data in a very efficient way that allows brewers to collect insight off of what they're looking at in a very quick, easy to interpret way. And so what we believe that provides brewers is the things that you see here, right? It's better control because you've got that quicker ability to assess what's going on, just the basics of what. It gives you greater repeatability because then you can take this visualized data and overlay it, as you'll see in a minute, to be able to look at batch-to-batch variability or consistency over time, which is going to drive efficiency for you, right? Because if you can detect those things more quickly in an easier to access way, then it means that you're going to be able to be more proactive about things. It means you're going to be able to wield this data in a way that's going to drive you towards basically more efficient process, and that better control over the process means you get to to make fermentations happen the way you want them to. So don't take just my word for it. These are some of the things that we've had, some of our partner breweries that we've plugged in with over the last year and a half. These are some of the things that they've said about it. We've been really excited to get the system out there, to get brewers working with it, to get their feedback on it. Some of the things I'm going to show you today come directly from brewer feedback that we've incorporated into next steps for our system and into our overall product roadmap, because at the end of the day, it's about making a tool that is as useful as it possibly can be for as many brewers as it possibly can be. So we take a lot of feedback to heart, including the positive stuff here that you can see. We really like working with the beer world in general. A number of us have come from it and are excited to be able to kind of provide this this system and still work within the brewing industry. We love you guys. All right, and so then the final thing that I'm going to kind of talk through as we jump into the demo is going to be what's new, right? So the big announcement today for us is this BrewMonitor 2.5. So we're stepping into a new realm. So the big ideas for it are that this is going to be focused information, putting specific data that brewers need in their hands as quickly as possible, and that we're also automating the transformation of data into actionable insights. So we really wanted to take this release and kind of step up what we've already been doing in those two main ways. And just in summary of those things, right, it's less clicks through the system with more insights. So you're going to see the console dashboard that we've redesigned based on brewer feedback, some advanced brand analytics tools that I'll be able to show you. I'll talk through the batch updates and summaries. And then one thing that I won't be able to show in the virtual demo, but I did want to point out is a greater CIP efficiency. So, one of the main things that we have to make sure that we are providing is a safe way to do this monitoring, right? It's a closed system. The beer is recirculating from the tank across the sensors and back into the tank. And so one of the first questions we get is from brewers is, how does this thing stay clean? And how do I know it's going to be safe for me to deploy over multiple fermentations? So we have a CIP process that we've put in place. It runs kind of on its own in the background. You turn it on, but we are working on and are going to be releasing with this new version a more efficient system for CIP. So it involves an immersion heater now that's going to get it up to pasteurization temperatures, and that's going to help us provide a big reduction, about a third of the overall time it takes to clean the device is being shaved off. So that's pretty exciting news. Anybody that's out there that's been using the system, I'm sure that's good to know that we've been working on that. So without further ado, I'm going to jump into our system demo. So what I'm going to pop up here is the web-based console. And it's going to land on this dashboard page, this control panel view. So what you're looking at here is a demo of a live fermentation. This one was just started an hour ago. So you can see it kind of hanging out there. It's a pale ale that's just been started. Again, these are the metrics that we're reading through. So we are collecting information on dissolved oxygen, pH, gravity, pressure, fluid temperature, conductivity, and ambient temperature. We're reading the readings that you can see on the right-hand side that I just talked through there are the most recent readings. So you're looking at a snapshot of what's happening inside of a fermentation vessel right now. Not only do I have that pale ale running, but I have a cider running that's about a day old, and I have another pale ale that's about a day old as well. And on this third one, what you can see here is these green zones on the previous graphs that you've seen where the different metrics are being read. Two of them, gravity and fluid temperature, have turned red because the measured data that the system is providing is outside of the preset sort of alert parameters that I've created for this pale ale brand. So I'll jump into how that works a little bit more in a minute. But just know that you have the ability to set these for a brand. And once they go red like this, not only do you have this visual reminder, but this is where what I mentioned previously about email and text message alerts comes from. So that's part of our real-time fermentation monitoring capability, is to push alerts out if something's going sideways from what you want it to. So I'm going to real quickly dive into this fermentation. We'll start with this so I can show you what this visualization looks like to start with. So the first thing that you're going to see when I'm looking at a specific fermentation is, as I scroll down here, you're seeing the data being read in this sort of historical view, right? Starting on the right-hand or left-hand side of these graphs at pitch time and moving forward in time from left to right. I'm seeing visualized the progression of this data. So I can see how dissolved oxygen was absorbed from the start of, from pitch down within those first few hours to the threshold of the sensor. I can see how pH had started moving down quickly right here within those first few hours as well, as the yeast already starts producing acid within solution. And then I've obviously got my mechanical functions in line as well. So I can see pressure, which is a reading of gauge pressure in addition to head pressure. I can see the fluid temperature right here as fermentation starts getting active. I can see those jackets kind of kicking on and off and jumping around in a much smaller scale there. I've got that ambient temperature and conductivity. And then I've also got all of these measurements are listed out here in this table as well, which I have the ability to export into a CSV file. So this is the basics of visualization that I wanted to show, because again, looking at this data table, right, this is just a lot of data to sift through. It's kind of hard with that high frequency data to really scan through everything and fully absorb as quickly as it is to just look at these graphs and see exactly what's been happening. So we wanted to give brewers not only the ability with that visualization to see what's going on in that simple way, where I can hover over, see the specific data points that are as they track along, right? But I also wanted, we also wanted to be able to provide brewers the ability to start analyzing this data and measure it against benchmarks in real time, right? Because it's not just about what this batch is doing, but it's about what this batch is doing compared to other batches as well, right? So I'll start by just showing we have the ability to overlay multiple fermentation parameters on top of each other. So if, for example, you might have noticed right here, I've got this little blip in dissolved oxygen jumping up. And it kind of looks like maybe around that same time, I had this little jump in pH. So if I want to overlay those two things to see if those two are correlated with each other, if they're potentially related, it looks like they are, right? The same timestamp I saw these two things happen. So I might be wondering, well, what exactly happened right there? And that's where we start looking into further insight. I go down immediately and look at pressure, and I see this big spike in pressure right here, right? That big jump upwards. And what that's telling me is that most likely I've had just a second knockout running into the tank that's increased the hydrostatic pressure within the tank. And that would account for driving up of the pH as it stabilizes more towards that starting point of the wort that's coming in fresh, as well as if I'm aerating that wort on its way into the tank, I'd see that little jump in oxygen. So you can see how quickly I can start to drive or derive analysis out of overlaying these multiple things. So like I said, it's not just about looking at that one batch, but looking at multiple batches. So jumping back to that benchmark idea, if I'm looking at and considering this brand and how I want this beer to perform versus some brand benchmarks, what we've built into the system is the ability to tag benchmarks, tag a particular batch, I should say, among a brand as a benchmark. So previously in this demo environment, under this pale ale brand, I've tagged a specific batch as a benchmark, and I can show that benchmark data. So if you can see it, it's kind of this gray shaded band that's running behind each one of these time series graphs that I'm displaying here. So I can look at that benchmark and in real time see that, oh, hey, here's how close or far away I am from that benchmark, from that standard that I've set for myself, right? But I also have the chance to see and create the system, have the system create this alert function around that benchmark. So what you're looking at in this green shaded area then is essentially a standard deviation buffer that's been built surrounding the progression for each time series of the benchmark data set. So literally I'm taking that benchmark, I'm building an alert zone around it. And if my subsequent fermentation, like this current fermentation, you can see these data points down here that are kind of low. I might be looking at right now a fermentation that's moving too quickly, right? That's attenuating more quickly than what I want it to. I've got these data points, these gravity data points starting to collect down here. That's outside of the normal path that I would look at for my benchmark. So this is where I'm getting those alerts. That's where we saw that red on the original page. And this is what's driving email alerts that are coming from the system to me, to my email address, to my phone number, however I want to set that up. And not only can I do that for this dynamic, where it's following and tracking that progression along this dynamic path, I can actually leave some of them as static. So for pressure, you can see I've just set a maximum and a minimum here. Same with fluid temperature. I've set a maximum and a minimum fluid temperature. And now that my fluid temperature is rising above where I wanted it to be, looks like about 70 degrees, I'm now receiving those alerts as well. So it also serves not only as a notification for any yeast health issues, but also for any mechanical issues that you might have in the brewery. So that gives you an idea of that kind of real-time process control capability that I have to be able to look at a batch in real time. But we also then wanted to take and start looking at deeper analytics for batches time over time, right? So if I go into my fermentation page, I'll show this really kind of briefly. But if I'm looking at all of the fermentations that I've logged in the system, so you can see my 3 live fermentations listed out right here. But I've also got all of any and all of the fermentations that I've tracked previously in the system are deposited in here. So you can see all of these fermentations listed out. I actually have the ability to compare multiple fermentations at a time. So this was one of the first steps of that deeper analytical tools that we wanted to do in kind of a diagnostic sense, right? So you're going back in and looking at these fermentations to stack them up against each other. So I'm going to scroll down real fast and I'm just going to show 3 fermentations overlaid on top of each other, all from that same pale ale brand we've just been looking at. And when I load up those 3 fermentations, what you see is here's the dissolved oxygen for each, here's the pH, gravity, and so on. And so what I have the ability to do is then zoom in on specific zones if I want to, or specific areas of the fermentation. And I can track along and see comparatively between the different batches where they were at the same point in time. And again, this is all being pinned. The 0 point over here is pitch time for the yeast. So we're using that pitch time to pin all of these together so that we're tracking along, on an hour by hour basis where these beers were compared to when the yeast was pitched. So I like to show this example, and one thing that I'll point out about it real fast is one of my favorite examples to use and talk about when I'm talking with folks about our system. So this was an example where a brewery we were working with came to us and said that they had a sensory red flag. Pale ale batch number 95, as we're calling it in this demo system, came through with an increase in ester formation. So they were getting sort of that nail polish remover range for their ester profile, which was above what they wanted, right? They just wanted kind of that apple pear, but nice ester profile to be well balanced. So they wanted to sit and sift through this data with us. So we blocked out some time and we pulled up these batches and started looking at it. And one of the things that we knew is that ester formation and acid creation by the yeast are linked together. So we took a look immediately at the pH graph here. After looking at gravity and seeing that the beers were pretty well in line, we jumped over to pH. And what we saw pretty quickly was the batch number 95 here, while it started at basically the same point as the other two fermentations, it very quickly dropped out to have the lowest pH among the three and the highest delta, right? The highest change from start to this low point overall. And so what we knew that meant was that the yeast had produced additional acid in this batch, which would line up pretty well with the increased ester formation that they had, right? Kind of confirmed that it was coming from excess acid production. And they were able to take that back and attach that to a cause and effect outcome of their pitch rates. So they reharvest yeast between batches, and the viability count was a little bit low, but what they thought was initially when they were pitching that it was within an acceptable range to be able to pitch it in. Obviously, the lower pitch rate ended up producing excess acid here, created that sensory difference. So now they've got a very tangible thing pinning that cause and effect of what happened with that batch to their standard operating procedures. So they're able to make that change and avoid this in the future using this data as a point. And so for us, it was a real validation for this product and what it's doing for us, right? Because it showed us how quickly you could arrive at these kinds of this kind of analysis, because we had set aside a full hour on a Zoom meeting to screen share and to look through these things. And about 15 minutes in, we had gotten to this conclusion and we sat back and said, wait, are we finished? And we were. So it was great. So this tool then becomes great for that kind of diagnostic system. You can also imagine how this would be useful if you're a brewery that runs into capacity issues where you're trying to squeeze every drop you can out of a specific tank. You can imagine having this kind of hour by hour breakdown of gravity if you're trying to do some experimentation to try to see if you can speed up fermentation by adjusting temperatures or slightly adjusting pitch rates in a way that obviously you're going to want to check sensory afterwards, right, to see if the beer still matches up. But assuming that the sensory is still intact and that the beer is tasting the way you want it to, you'll have this hour by hour breakdown to really be able to look at how you can shave down time on production. It's all those sorts of things that are going to be helpful to brewers in using this kind of analytical tool to really drive that efficiency for you. So all of that encompasses everything that we've built into the system prior to sort of the 2.5 release. So I do want to spend some time jumping in and showing what our BrewMonitor 2.5 does in particular, that gives you more focused information, again, putting that specific data that you want in your hands as quickly as possible, but then also automating the deeper transformation of this data into actionable insights. So first, what I'll do is show you, I'm going to jump over to this preview section. All of these things are coming online. They'll be available in quarter 4 of this year. So this is still just slightly works in progress. We're just kind of putting different lipstick on it and things like that to make sure that it looks appropriate and is streamlined and debugged as it possibly can be. But here's the first thing that you're looking at. So if you remember that previous dashboard screen that we looked at when we first jumped onto this demo, it was those line graphs, and I could only see one fermentation at a time on that page. What we've done is, based on brewery feedback, is we've built this into a more compact screen that's giving you more focused information, as well as a couple of additional pieces. So the first thing that I'll point out is you've still got gravity, pH, fluid temperature, pressure, and dissolved oxygen here running along the bottom of the screen. You can see the red and green panels to let me know that I'm still within all my parameters here for this pale ale up top, and the demo side are here. But the pale ale down at the bottom, you can see I've still got those alarms going off for gravity and fluid temperature. So all of that stuff is still intact. The other thing that it's showing you is this gravity progress bar. This is one of the big key things that we built in. So for each brand, when you're building the brand out in the system, you have the ability to put in target starting and finishing gravities. And once you build those things in, what you're going to see and what the system is going to give you is, once it starts collecting readings, it's going to tell you how far along that progress you are from your starting gravity to your terminal gravity. So I can see that this demo pale ale here that we were just looking at is 76% of the way to finished, to its terminal, whereas the pale ale that just started just outside of an hour ago is still at 0% progress. So it's still sitting up at right about 12.5 degrees Plato. So I'm getting that quick information. The idea here was that we were streamlining this information so that you would be able to quickly log in, quickly assess across your entire cellar where each of your beers are, so that you can kind of collect this instead of we're imagining those breweries that have production team meetings in the morning, where someone's run around to each tank, taking the dailies, getting the most up-to-date information on what's happening inside the tanks. And then you sit down as a team and decide, okay, we got a dry hop over here, we've got to harvest yeast over there, we got to start spunding over there, right? All of those things. Now you've just got this dashboard that's going to tell you exactly where all these things are without having to do any of that manual pre-work. So it's just delivering that data to you in a much more streamlined way, and it's all the data that you need right there at your fingertips. Not only that, but I will, before jumping into the next phase of this, but I do want to point out that this entire dashboard view has been built out so that all of that information about your entire brewery is kind of at your fingertips, right? So I can scroll down, start looking through all the brands that I have logged in the system, so I can see my cider with its targets sitting here. I can see any of those other brands that I've built out. Here's a pale ale. The pale ale we've been looking at is right here. I can see how many fermentations I've run on it. As well as, if I scroll back up, I've got an alert dashboard that just shows me, if I want to just look at real quickly where any of my alerts are and what those alerts are. I can see I've got my pale ale alert sitting right here, what it's showing. I can see what sensor hubs I have deployed. I've got 3 plugged in, and I've got 2 more that are waiting to be used in the brewery right now. And I can see my most recently completed fermentations if I want to go back. If I've just ended a fermentation and I want to quickly access it right here, I've got access to those previous fermentations as well. So all of it's right here from this dashboard page. All of these widgets are in place to give that information and all of that stuff at your fingertips. The one other thing I'll point out about this before I leave is that this same dashboard view right here, this kind of control panel that we're looking at, we have also built in this a daily summary email that you have the ability to opt into. So if you want your seller team, your production team to receive all of this information at a set time of day each day, you can do that. So at 7 a.m., the system will automatically generate an email, and it will basically show you this exact information from that, the most recent data that it's collected at that point in time, and it'll email it out to anybody that's relevant in your brewery that you set up to receive that email. So again, just sending that data and meeting brewers where they are with that data. You don't have to log in to come find it and dig through and see. It's just automatically pushed out to you if you want it. And so the final thing that I'm going to kind of show and talk through is the brands page. So I just jumped over to look at all of the brands. So we saw those kind of listed out down at the bottom of that dashboard. That initial landing page when you first log in, what that preview of what that's going to look like. So this is a preview of what our brands page is going to look like. So if you click in to look through all of the brands, you'll see them all listed out here. Right now they're alphabetical, but I have the ability to sort them by style. I have the ability to sort them by the number of fermentations that I've completed with them, which I'm going to use real fast and sort that way because I'm going to jump into one of these brands and kind of show what our deeper analytics for the brands overall looks like. So you can start looking at and analyzing variability between batches for any particular brand. So I'm going to open up this No Coast Pale Ale that we've got in the system. I've got 13 completed fermentations for this. So that's a healthy amount to really start digging in and looking at analytics. And when I click on that, what you're going to see is the name, the style, my targets for starting and finishing gravity, my yeast information, what strain I'm putting in there. We hope to soon be building in sort of drop-down menus for this so that you can kind of select if you're using, White Labs or Omega or Fermentus or Lallemand or whoever it is, right? We'll have those strains kind of plugged in eventually. And then all of the fermentations that we've tracked, right? I can see it more concisely here from this brand page. So I just want to look at my No Coast Pale Ale, what fermentations have I run, and then some basic kind of analytics. So what was my starting gravity, my finishing, and then I'll explain what these phase 1 starts and phase 4 starts are there in just a second. So I can see all those fermentations. If I clicked into any one of them, I'd be taken back to that same page that we saw on a single fermentation where I'm looking at those 7 graphs. I've got the data table listed out down below, so I can do that single batch analysis. But to dig into the analysis of what these brands are going to show us, I'm going to pop over here and look at graphically, again, visualizing this data. Here's an analysis that's showing all of the starting gravities and finishing gravities for each one of these batches. So I can see those slight variations there. Now, if I want to dig into that a little bit more, I can jump down here to my starting gravity variance, for example. So here's all the variations of starting gravities above and below my target starting gravity. So I can see, they're all within a degree Plato, but I've got these top 2 that are right at about half a degree Plato of a variation above or below that target. And then I can see how those potentially influence the finishing gravity for each of these, right? So I can look at how far above or below that target was my finishing gravity. So again, just gives me a real quick, easy way to start assessing where I've seen variations, on various batches, so that if I know that, hey, I did a specific thing different, starting with batch 1310 here, right? That's somehow causing me to potentially over attenuate. I'll be able to see that really quickly, right? And then I'll jump into what this phase 1 and phase 4 starting are. So phase 1 starting is basically how long did your lag phase last before fermentation actually started kicking off? When did active fermentation, when did your exponential phase or your growth phase start? And so we see that here, that I've got a whole range on this brand in particular. So this is a pretty variable thing for me. If I'm looking at this brand, I might start wondering what exactly is happening that's causing such great variability. I've got one batch that it took over 20 hours to finally start fermenting from that lag phase. So maybe this is going to give me some insight into when I'm reharvesting, how many batches am I getting out of it before that lag phase really starts to drag behind. And then in that same way, phase 4 is basically started at about, I believe we're at 93% of targeted attenuation is when we qualify it as phase 4. So right as that gravity curve is starting to slow down and taper off towards hitting terminal, that's where we start marking phase 4 of fermentation in our system. So you can see how long did it take me roughly to reach that almost terminal point for this beer, which again is a pretty significant thing, right? There's some pretty significant variability here as well. You can see I've got, this fermentation that reached that phase 4 point where it was close to terminal at about 51 hours into fermentation. And then I've got this other guy that took almost 300 hours, right? So what's causing that wild variability, and, how you can start digging into that to figure those things out, right? This system puts you directly at that point to start asking those questions so that you're not having to spend all of that time collecting this data, running it through deeper analysis to figure it out. And this is also a pretty unique thing to be able to look at, right? Because we've got a truly hour by hour basis of how long this beer has taken you because we're taking readings that frequently. So it's something that our system is uniquely able to provide. And then finally, with this brand information, the thing that I'm even more excited about is this ability to visualize your brand overall. So what you're looking at here is an average gravity curve for the total fermentations collected and monitored. So I'm looking at, let's say 50 hours into fermentation, what was my average Plato reading, how far along on average were each one of my batches. And so I can look at that and see, okay, I was at 4.5 degrees Plato, just above, right, on average. Then I've got my standard deviation measure that kind of gives me, here's from max to min, here's my standard measures kind of surrounding. So how variable were all of those data sets? So you can see it's a pretty small variation here at the top, which we'd expect to see, right? We're knocking out kind of around that same point. We saw that variability that didn't go much wider than about 0.5 degree Plato above or below my target starting gravity. But you can see that reflected. That's a pretty narrow standard deviation here. Whereas down in this middle point, I've got a much wider, because I've got wider variability right there between batches. So I can look at my maximum, my minimum. I can see, what was the more or less highest gravity fermentation data that's been collected along the course of all these fermentations. What's the lowest? And then most importantly, I've got the ability to grab specific batch data. So I can look at batch 1308 if I want to, and see where it falls compared to the average, compared to that maximum and minimum. So I've got all that data intact. So this becomes a really powerful tool, again, to really visualize the variability of data from one batch to the next, right? And variability of those batches to really start to drive home consistency. Because the name of the game in brewing, right, is you've got customers that are looking for the same experience with a particular beer, whether it's your flagship or a seasonal, right, that they're coming back to a year later. you want to be able to provide them with that same experience that they've had previously. And this is the type of tool that's going to be able to really hone in and drive that consistency and that efficiency over time. One other thing that I'll show you that's a really kind of a fun thing that we've built in. So if I'm looking at, actually, I'm going to go back and pull up that single fermentation again. I'm going to hide the maximum and the minimum there, so I'm seeing my data set. But one of the things that we have the ability to do is to show the style. So we're taking readings obviously beyond just one single brewery and the pale ale of one single brewery, but now I have the ability to show what pale ales look like as a group across many breweries, right? So you can see essentially how your pale ale stacks up against a wider amalgam of pale ales being produced in the industry at large. So you can see that this pale ale brand, it looks as though it's fermenting a little bit more slowly on average to this sort of industry average that I can see here in this darker blue. So just some interesting things to note and kind of be able to stack yourself up against and see, do I have room to move this fermentation around a little bit? Where can I drive in some further efficiency? What might put this in line a little bit more, and how can I drive sort of better efficiency or deeper consistency with it? So again, all of this kind of showcases the system's new capabilities. This is all part of that 2.5 release that's going to be coming out in Q4, and all of this is building towards the automating of transforming your data into actionable insights that you can actually do something with to impact the bottom line and the ROI of our system within your brewery. So with that ends the specific demo that I have to share. And so I will open it up to any questions anyone might have to close things out. Awesome. I've got a great presentation from Marcus. Thanks, Marcus. So David just asked, I saw a section about an API. Is this allowed for third-party interaction? It is. So we've sort of built a standardized API that we're able to open up for brewers or for somebody that a brewer hires to come in and stream this data from this system. So we're pretty proud of the visualization that we've built, but we're also understanding of brewers that have their own ways of visualizing data. So if the important thing for you is to be able to just have this data at your fingertips, but to be able to analyze it and visualize it somewhere else, that's great. You can build, or we can work with you to interface an API. We also do already have standardized API functioning in place with Beer 30 software, and we are working on it currently with a couple of other vendors, including like Grist Analytics, to be able to flow this data into those systems in an automated way. So Beer 30 is already online, and a couple more coming down the road here. Hopefully within the next few months, we'll have a couple more to offer up as well. So. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate being able to come on and share this information about our system. We're really excited about the information that we're able to provide. And if you guys have any questions or want to talk further about potential trials, we do have trials available of the system. You can reach out to info@precisionfermentation.com or check out our website at www.precisionfermentation.com. And it looks like David has one more question here. He says, is it used for data flow out of your system only? Can we put data into your system? So at this current point, as it stands, it's only for data flowing out of our system. We've not built in an ability to bring data into the system yet, although that is something that we've discussed. So if you'd like to have that discussion with us and talk in further detail, David, certainly you can reach out. I'd be happy to talk with you. My email personally is amorrison@Precision Fermentation, or again, you can reach out to info and talk to one of our national account executives who can, we can route you and get you in conversation with our development team to talk about what it would take to link you up with our system. So. Awesome. Well, with that, Andrew and the CBP here, we really appreciate the ability to work with you guys and to get this information out about the system. So hopefully I've shared some information here that's intriguing and useful to brewers. And again, reach out to us at info@precisionfermentation.com or check out our website at www.precisionfermentation.com for more information on us. Thanks so much.